Hello. So WDC came out a while ago, and everybody's been talking about it. That sounds really cringy. Anyway, I wanted to give my thoughts on the whole thing. I didn't watch it, but I did see Brownie's kind of commentary on it. I didn't get a notification for it on YouTube, so I actually missed it. And I would be watching it now, but instead we are going to get Talos of Tex. Like, we're going to kind of watch his video, and I'm going to give my commentary on it. But I also have a few other things to say after watching, I think it was Snazzy Labs. He had a great video on this. Should Apple exist in 2020 or something like that? Do they need to exist? I think that would be a better question. Do they need to exist in 2020? How productive are they? You know, he was giving that whole like rundown, and his perspective was pretty interesting. I didn't see the whole video because it was outdated, even though it was like 2 months ago, and Apple has recently gone with their silicone chips. They're getting rid of Intel, stuff like that. So anyway, let's go ahead and watch this video real quick, and we'll see. Let's watch it.
List this week is iPadOS 14, which honestly I might go as far as to say this is the most disappointing operating system we found out about at this event. It feels like this entire keynote was mainly about all of the changes coming to iOS 14 and the Mac. That feels like there was a ton of Mac screen time, but some of you may think, well, tvOS was super boring. That was way less interesting. Or watchOS 7, that was more boring than iPadOS 14. But I think the reason I feel iPadOS was so disappointing and potentially the most boring operating system upgrade was because we were expecting so much more. I mean, you guys didn't have big wish lists for...
So, as far as the iPhone goes, Brownie, I think it's Mark Brownie. God, the black guy that does the tech videos, you know? He was talking about it. He said that iOS finally implemented a bunch of features that Android has already had, and I can't exactly remember what those features are, but Android has had them for like a couple of years, and it was really bad. He might go through them here, so if I remember them, I'll point them out.
For your tvOS options, and there weren't a bunch of people hoping for, giant changes within watchOS, and we'll talk about those at another time, but there was a lot of hype, and there was a lot of expectations going forward with iPadOS, and we didn't really get many of them met. Either way, though, I'll still be going over the changes today. Let's begin. So first of all, let's just get the stuff from iOS 14 over with. Yes, Siri has a redesign. She's a little blob in the corner now that, again, disengages as soon as you tap anything else. You got your updated iOS 14 style widgets up here as well. But the bizarre thing about this is it's kind of the iOS 14 widgets, but worse, because these widgets only stay in this little side tab. So that means that you cannot add iOS 14 widgets to the home screen anywhere else. You have to stick them right on the left side of the column, or, if you're in portrait mode, you have to swipe over, and that's the only place you can put them, which I find kind of a bummer, because the iPad's display is huge, and we have all these widget options now. Wouldn't it have been nice if we could add some of these widgets to the actual iPad home screen as well? Nope, you gotta keep them on the far left, so I guess they're technically on the home screen, but I don't know, it just feels like kind of a missed opportunity in my book. They also did not add the app library, so when you swipe all the way over, there's nothing there, so that's exclusive to iOS 14 now, and we already...
Oh, yes. So the app library was one of the things that they added to the iPhone, which Android has had forever. The way Apple goes about implementing features is absolutely awful. And they're very slow. They're really good on their phones as far as updates on time, and I'm sorry, like, it just working. Like, I have an Android phone. I love my Android phone. All right, the customability is fantastic. Always. It will always be better than an iPhone because of the customability. But having updates and stuff like that is a problem. And the amount of Android phones out there is also an issue. It's either the amount of Android phones or the fact that Android is like Linux and there's not a standard to it whatsoever. I would say Linux is probably a little bit more stable than Android for whatever reason, as far as like bugs and stuff like that. But either way,
already had picture-in-picture, so yes, of course, that's there. But a few things got design tweaks, so there's a lot of apps you'll see columns in now, which maximizes kind of the iPad screen real estate, which is a good change. I'm happy with it.
Sorry, weird nitpick. She looks like iCarly. What? No? Okay. So good.
Which maximizes kind of the iPad screen real estate, which is a good change. I'm happy with it. When you're playing music, it actually brings up the lyrics and lets you control the song at the same time. So overall, it looks fairly clean. I'm happy with the design changes made with Apple Music, but I think most people listening to music on the iPad don't just leave Apple Music open the whole time. There's also, of course, a big change to search. So it's very easy to do with the Magic Keyboard because you can just do Command Space and you can activate it from within lots of different apps, and it gives you this redesigned look of search. And you can bring stuff up, Google things, or directly bring out certain apps if you'd like. It's a nice little feature change, but I feel like that's most of the changes. I know that what a lot of people want to talk about is the Apple Pencil changes, but honestly, I find them kind of unnecessary. So yeah, when you're typing a URL or something, you can actually just use Scribble to write the actual text you want to search or highlight the text within Notes. But what I've noticed about handwriting is that it's insanely slower than just typing. So there's some people out there that might appreciate the Apple Pencil changes of, auto-detecting shapes and that kind of thing, but frankly, I don't see how this is any faster than just typing, and because I'm using my iPad with the Magic Keyboard so much anyway, the idea of taking my Apple Pencil just so that I can text people with Scribble using the pencil, some people might like it because using a stylus is fun, but in my opinion, it's kind of gimmicky. I'm definitely not going to be scribbling things too often with the Apple Pencil, so not that big of a change in my book. Nifty, but especially considering how big last year's operating system upgrade was, right? Maybe that's why I had so much false hope, was because I was thinking if the iPad got a huge number of changes last year, then it had to have been topped this year, right? Where it feels kind of like an S upgrade. It actually pushes me to the point of thinking that iPadOS 13.4, which gave us cursor support when they launched a Magic Keyboard and redesigned so much of the user interface so that I'd be able to actually use this thing as a dedicated laptop, I feel like there were more changes in 13.4 than there were in actual iPadOS 14, or at least the changes were more noticeable and appreciated. And I'm very confused because you guys know for the longest time I was thinking, well, if Apple's launching 13.4 now with cursor support and they're unveiling the Magic Keyboard and everything, they must have something big in store for the iPad at DubDub this year, right? I was assuming, because we were seeing leaks that Final Cut, Logic, and Xcode were coming, I thought we were going to get Pro apps with the iPad this year. And nope, no Pro applications were added really of any kind other than, you got Translate now, so you can do that. Siri got a little smarter, but overall, I'm very confused why Apple decided to unveil the Magic Keyboard when they did and launch cursor support when they did, if this was really all they had planned for iPadOS. I know some of us are thinking, well, Final Cut, Logic, Xcode, they're coming later, but I'm still confused why not unveil them at the developer event, If you had them in store or you have them in development, like Apple has Final Cut and Logic optimized to run on the A12Z chip with the...
Anytime I see those, for whatever reason, I think of Jimmy Neutron. The stubby noses.
Developer kit, and they showcased how that's working with Apple-made silicon, so they can actually run macOS on Apple-branded CPUs now. If you're building Final Cut to run on that stuff, why not put it...
Okay, well, I guess he is absolutely done. I don't really want to get into another video whatsoever. So, you might know what the iOS features are, and that's fine. My whole deal is with Apple existing in 2020. Based on this WDC, they don't really have anything new to offer. With Apple getting rid of its Intel support later, it's hard to know if they're actually saying goodbye to Intel, or if that's going to be like 5 years down the line. Either way, I think my point still stands, which I'm about to make here in a moment. But with the silicone, I guess they then become the absolute like figurehead or whatever. They are using their own proprietary stuff. They use their own chip, blah, blah, blah. They don't have to outsource to anyone else. I'm not sure who else like they pay for like other types of resources. I believe like Samsung makes their screens or something like that. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there was a rumor about that. But this kind of is, I feel, pretty relevant, especially with the whole USB-C thing. Apple not making their phones compatible with something like that. Apple constantly having to have proprietary stuff so they get all the money. I don't believe that Apple needs to exist in 2020. I am really disappointed in people that put them as the standard for technology. I believe they're the ones that got rid of the floppy disk. They've gotten rid of the disk drive. And then you have other computers follow their lead, basically, in making stupid decisions like that. Now, obviously, things are going to die when they're going to die, but forcing them to automatically die is a pretty dumb decision. And I think it was pretty forced when they came out with a phone that had no headphone jack. I think that's absolutely fucked up. Doing so causes a lot of issues. Now, I do have Apple AirPods. I use them with my Android, and they cut out all the time. I actually think it's my Bluetooth module on my Android. But either way, I did have an iPhone 5, and I used it for a while before my iPhone just completely stopped working. And wired is so much better. It is just so much better. Using wired headphones are going to be like always, you can count on them and stuff like that. So I don't want to get into a wired versus wireless debate on anything right now, but being able to be the basically father, of what's going to happen in the tech industry is actually pretty concerning. And the way people put Apple on a pedestal is absolutely concerning. Apple doesn't need to exist in 2020. The thing they have going for it is their phones. Their phones are great, like I said earlier. They get updates on time. They're not going to lag very much whatsoever. And companies are able to develop for a phone, and they know that everything, that their program is going to be very seamless on that phone and on other versions of that phone. And when it comes to Android, there's like a one size fits all as far as Mr. Who's the Boss says, a one size fits all, because there's so many Android phones. And that sucks. However, the customability is still there. And that's what works for Android. Apple gets its phones correct. Their computers don't need to exist anymore. and their computers don't need to exist because you can get other computers that are way cheaper, way faster, and the performance is like just better productivity all around when you have a faster computer. It doesn't matter what it is. The layout and the UI is nice sometimes, but people have complained that them being I keep, for whatever reason, family friendly comes to mind. That's not what I mean, but user friendly. Them being user friendly is not the case as much anymore at all. Before, it was this nice computer. It was a very elegant, streamlined thing, and then people started moving past all the looks, of what was going on the outside, and getting into the software and stuff like that, and you basically have yourself a Linux device. Linux is very customizable. You can operate, or you can create a Linux distro, to look like Mac OS, or to specifically design for user friendliness, stuff like that. A good example would be Elementary OS, and there's some other examples too. I can't think off the top of my head, but Elementary OS was one of the first ones I thought was based off the Mac UI, and it works. It's like a regular Linux desktop. You have Ubuntu. Ubuntu is insanely popular, in the Linux world, and it works. It's like it just works, out of the box. And that's one of those things where you're not like having to fool with the terminal or anything like that as far as some of those OSs goes. Now, you have Arc and others like that where you do have to fool around with the terminal and build it from scratch, and that's a pain in the ass. But there are a lot of Linux distributions that don't do that. You have Cinnamon, not Cinnamon. You have Linux Mint, Ubuntu, Fedora, I was going to say CentOS, but anyway, stuff like that. So when it comes to Apple, I don't believe that they need to exist anymore, and I don't know why people still put them on a pedestal. I don't think it's right whatsoever. I think it's very fucked up, and I think it fucks up our tech industry when we have one company that everyone, kisses the fucking ground that they walk on and follows behind them. And instead of there are companies that innovate and go their different routes, and that's great. But a lot of these decisions that Apple has made, we as consumers, as PC, customers have had to suffer the consequences for. Like fucking finding a laptop with a damn disk drive, finding a desktop with a disk drive or something like that. And that's a pain in the ass. That's not fun. Being able to have a phone with a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, a new phone with a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. There are some of them out there, and that's great. But for Apple to have to do that, that's not okay. We're not going to sit there and use fucking AirPods the entire time. I stream, okay? I record videos. I'm not going to sit there and rely on my Bluetooth headset to fucking record a video. I'm not going to do that. There's going to be lag. There's going to be problems. There always is. I'm going to rely on a fucking cord. That's a wired headset. That's what I'm going to rely on because I know it's going to work. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys understood what I was saying. What are your thoughts? Do you think Apple should exist? Do you understand, I guess, where I'm coming from? Stuff like that. Anyway, you guys have a great day. I'll see you guys in the next video.